Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Who do we have in the room? Hi, it meant to be RVN. Good to see you. I have Jim down here in the green room. Just hang out, Jim. We'll have you on here in a bit, bud. I'm going to kind of hold off here a few minutes for people to get into the room here. This link here is going to be for Dustin, Jerry, and Michael. Hang on just a few minutes here. Oh, there it is. There we go. Got my echo out of there finally. All righty. There we go. All my guests are in the room. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started here in just a minute.
It is, in a way, an odd thing to honor those who died in defense of our country, in defense of us, in wars far away. The imagination plays a trick. We see these soldiers in our mind as old and wise. We see them as something like the founding fathers, grave and gray-haired. But most of them were boys when they died, and they gave up two lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up their chance to be revered old men. They gave up everything for our country, for us. We owe them a debt we can never repay. All we can do is remember them, what they did, and why they had to be brave for us.
I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us tonight on Memorial Day, a day of remembrance. And I have a few guests I want to bring into the room and talk about, just their thoughts on Memorial Day and what it means to them. And we'll get their perspective. We'll bring in Michael from our Epic RV Adventure, Dustin from Wave Wags, and Jerry from Happy Place Diaries. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Good, man. Good to see you, John.
Well, thanks for joining me. I don't know who wants to start.
We're just talking about Memorial Day, and
No, we're talking about Valentine's Day, Dustin. Jeez.
Yeah, I know. Well, are we talking about what it means to us, or are we talking about the difference between different kinds of holidays? I mean, there is some education that probably needs to happen in the United States with Armed Forces Day, Veterans Day, and Memorial Day. So we'll start there. Armed Forces Day is for those who are currently serving and to celebrate them. And Veterans Day is for anyone who has served, worn the uniform, is a veteran. And Memorial Day today is the day that we remember those who didn't make it home.
That's right. Is he buffering or did he finish?
Oh, he's finished.
He's finished. Like I said a little bit earlier, hopefully some folks were in there, but it's the day that my perspective is it's all about those that not only raised their right hand and said, I will go, but they're the ones that also paid the full measure. They're the ones that took out the checkbook of their life and wrote a blank check and said that I'm sure they didn't volunteer to lose their life in combat, but they did volunteer to go and pay that ultimate sacrifice, knowing the hazard that they were getting into. I like to think about that first stanza of the Ranger Creed that says that I recognize that I volunteered, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. And I will never do anything to discredit that. Those aren't the exact words, but and I think that the people that we honor today, they understood that going in. And while every life is tragic, the fact that we memorialize them today, and for most of us on every day, it assures that those guys will have never died in vain and they'll never be forgotten.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm still Memorial Day weekend has been a struggle for me for many, many years. Simply because I was almost one of the ones on the other side of this. I was literally minutes away from, being the one talked about instead of the one talking. And so it's a struggle, but and for those of you who saw my video yesterday, I mean, I literally shot that video yesterday and in one take without thinking, and so what came out was straight from the heart and how I felt. But for me, I mean, I've been in the military 33 years and counting so far. And when I first joined, I was a young kid, and I think Memorial Day weekend was, hey, it's a 3-day weekend. Let's party, have a good time. Didn't really think about what Memorial Day actually meant. But which I think is the way most people are, especially younger people, because they don't know. But then I started really understanding, and then I started living it, and then started seeing people who, that day was, or that weekend is really for them. The families of the fallen, meeting Gold Star families, and for those of you who don't know what a Gold Star family is, real quick, a Gold Star family is, well, to back up, if a family has a member serving, they're considered a Blue Star family, serving overseas. Now, if that member dies, then they're a gold star. And a lot of states actually have license plates, customized license plates you can get that denote that they're a gold star family. So if you ever see a license plate with that gold star on it, or you see they may have, and it's a banner, it's a white banner with a red outline, and then either a gold or a blue star in the middle. If you ever see a banner on somebody's car or on somebody's window at their home with that gold star on it, just know that their family member, son, daughter, husband, wife, whoever, they gave the ultimate sacrifice, and take a minute and say thank you to them, for their loved one's service. And but as I've gone through my life, and like I said, got in meet these gold star families and stuff like that, I really truly understand the true meaning of it. But at the same time, it is a time for celebration. It's not a time to sit in a corner and cry. We need to celebrate the courage of those folks who, put it all out there, paid the ultimate price, and now we get to benefit from that. And we'd be doing them a severe disservice if we didn't exercise the freedoms that they died for us to have.
Yeah, I think, Justin's point about, education is super important, that these days are not all the same. And I often feel awkward when somebody thanks me for my service on Memorial Day, because I know guys that, go thank Joyce Lindsay. She's got a gold star banner. Thank her. Don't thank me. My day's coming in November. We get a day. So yeah, I'm with Dustin on the education piece.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's just a day for celebration and barbecues and thanking veterans, and they don't realize it's for the ones that didn't make it home, or the ones that made it home but aren't with us today.
I don't get too wound up on the Happy Memorial Day thing. It does irritate me, but I'm not gonna go all ballistic on somebody. Now, Shelly just mentioned right before this live stream that someone posted on our church's Facebook page, "Happy Memorial Day, everybody." Oh, whatever. In our church's Facebook group, not page. Do you want to come on here and tell the story? I mean, this is live. This is being broadcast all over the world, and you're messing up John's live stream here.
Oh no, not at all.
Oh, I don't know if you just heard that. She said, "We'll tell the story right here." That's what she just told me.
Oh man!
But
Justin, quick talk.
Save us.
Man.
So I don't, if the situation seems appropriate, I'll try to educate and correct. But I'm not gonna try to. I'm gonna try not to make it an awkward situation. At the same time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna make it awkward. I'm just, hey.
No more awkward than what this is going on right here.
Well,
not right here.
You're making it weird.
Yeah. Our internet out here is a little spotty, so if I start buffering or whatever, I apologize. But I think it starts at home. We have, for the past, I can't even remember the last time we did not go to a memorial or a museum or a cemetery on Memorial Day. And we've always taken our daughter with us, and our daughter has always known the meaning of Memorial Day, especially after I served in combat, and she got to know some of the guys that I served with. And when some of those guys didn't come home, it meant more to my daughter. So it starts at the next generation. If we let the next generation let it die, then it'll die.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I was saying earlier, that, when you look at the monuments and the memorials that we've erected, to have something visual to remember these folks by, the units. And Dustin, I tell you what a fantastic video you put out. Going through Fort Benning, because that's just a little, that's a pocket, in a snapshot of the greater of what are, and I'll just speak for Army, right? But you go to the Ranger Monument and you see all of those campaigns, and look, it doesn't matter what era you're in. Warfare will always come down to boots on the ground. I mean, even look at the Star Wars movies. It comes down to stormtroopers that can't shoot, but it's boots on the ground. And so when you look at that airborne battle memorial, phenomenal. But underneath every single parachute, when those doors opened, under every parachute was a guy, and so you could go to the monument and look at the cool C-130 that's over there, and the C-17 or that C-9 or whatever it was back then, the B-9, and every time I see stuff like that, I don't look at the machinery, but I think of the men that built that airplane. I think of the and women that built that airplane. I think of those troops that exited the aircraft, landed in the middle of the night, and the sacrifice that every step out of the door, those guys knew that they were entering the gates of hell.
Yeah.
And what was it? 17,000 troopers that one night,
Yeah.
That's my town. And and you look at the numbers. Somebody posted something on Facebook the other day about the Vietnam Wall. And John, you might know more about the numbers than I do, but I was astounded at the numbers, and they broke it down by age of how many there was, how many were under 16.
Oh God, there was
how many Vietnam
3,000
veteran, how many guys died in Vietnam that were under the age of 16? And I'm thinking, what kind of people are these? Because all you hear about Vietnam are the stories about people getting spat on, or not treated well, or running to Canada. And these guys are 16 and they wanted to be there to serve. I mean, who are these people that we grow to go off and do our nation's bidding? And that's why we have Memorial Day.
Yeah. And it kind of gets, even though it's one day, I noticed this today when I was riding in the car. We took a long ride today. We went out to Andersonville, Georgia, which was a previous POW camp for the Civil War. And we went out there. We've been going out there for years with our Combat Vets Association. And so we went out there today and we laid a wreath. And on the way there, I'm listening to the radio, and like every so often between songs, they'll come on and they'll say, remember the reason why Memorial Day, and thank you to all those service members who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And, that's good that they do that. And I appreciate that they do that. But in my mind, I'm like, it just becomes, when you hear it so many times, it just becomes words and just something that you're supposed to say. And it doesn't really have as much meaning to the lay person or the civilian. I mean, but when I hear it, when I hear taps, when I hear the bagpipes and all that stuff, I mean, it means more when you've seen it firsthand. It means more when you've lived it. It means more when you've watched people make that sacrifice. Like, witness them make that sacrifice. when you've watched somebody make that sacrifice, man, it's a whole different ballgame.
That's a fact. We were sitting around the campfire here last night, and we were kind of talking about some of that, and you know, watching from the perspective of, you know, the sergeant major out on the battlefield, and you look at the eyes of a 19-year-old kid, you know, that just, you know, lost a part, or, you know, you're getting them on the helicopter and you're just hoping to God that, you know, that they get to go home and see their family again. Yeah, there's something about being eyeball to eyeball with that it really it codifies it in your heart. And you know, I can't hear taps without getting a lump in my throat. You know, it's not just you know, notes being played. It's you know, it you know, it has more meaning to me today than it did when I was 18, you know, than when I was a kid. Certainly has a lot more meaning. And you know, and we all process it differently. But I'm with you. I guess one of the things that I would like to see happen, and I'm a part of trying to make it happen, or at least educate that, is not so that it gets said so much that it becomes white noise. Right. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so this goes back to educating our children and letting them know, because as much as I could sit there and I could talk to my daughter and I could explain to her the meaning of Memorial Day, she's not going to feel Memorial Day like I feel Memorial Day. But I need to tell her, I mean, of course, not in detail, but I need to tell her stories. I need to tell her, you know, accounts of the men and what they did, and how they ran toward bullets, and how they dismounted vehicles, knowing that it could be the last time they stepped foot out of a Humvee, last time they stepped foot out of an aircraft. And you know, so as much as I can't make her feel it, I have to try my best to make her feel the meaning of it and not just hear the meaning of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We, you know, raised our, and there's just something. I guess if I were king for the day, and we were talking about Memorial Day, that sentiment that Dustin just shared would be kind of the starting point, right? That would be the, hey, this isn't yes, barbecue, have a 3-day weekend, but put a face with every single thing that you do this weekend, you know. And that's something that I've done with, you know, my kids, with our scouts when we take them up to put flags on up at Willamette National. You know, don't just put the flag down. Read the guy's name. You know, look at the campaign that he was a part of. We have 5 Medal of Honor recipients from Oregon, all posthumous, and they're buried at the top of Willamette National Cemetery. And I always make sure that we take those kids up there and tell their story. You know, what did they do? You know, because there is something special about a person that is willing to, as Dustin said, you know, not run away from the gunfire, but run toward it. Yeah. That's just that's not something that's built in.
No,
it's not. It takes a special person, and most of those, almost every one of the people who do that, they don't do it out of a sense of duty to the country or a sense of duty to the uniform. They do it out of a sense of the person to the left and the right, their buddies.
Exactly.
Yeah. And when people say that, you know, so and so, you know, died for their country, they did, but they really died for their buddies. And and that's just how personal it is. There's very few people, especially in an infantry unit, even though I've never been a part of one, I know a lot of people like these guys down here. I mean, it's a family, and those guys do crazy, reckless things to protect their family members.
Yeah.
And it's the family first. It's not the, the flag, the country, mom, apple pie, and none of that. It's their buddies to the left and the right. Now, and Jerry, what you're talking about is so right. It's not just you got to make that connection. Visit that cemetery, make that connection. Like I said in my video yesterday, I did when I did Air Force Honor Guard for 3 years. I probably did around 300 plus funerals in that time, and I probably gave the flag about 100 times. Every one of those, there's a script you're supposed to say. Thank you on behalf of a grateful nation. Thank you, something like that. I don't remember the words. I never did it. I never went by the script. I got in trouble almost every single time because I didn't go by. In fact, I didn't go by the script. And the reason I didn't go by the script was very simple.
Because it sounds like a script.
Yeah, I had the person's bio. We generally met the family, before the funeral service. So you always heard some kind of little anecdote or quick story about the deceased, and so there was a beginning of a personal connection between me and that family. And so whenever I gave them that flag, I made it personal. Every single one of them, every 100 plus times I gave that flag, I said something different, but I said something that meant something to those people because that's the least I could do. That's the very least I could do for them. And
I can tell you that out of those 100, you probably don't remember exactly what you said to each one of them, but each one of them remember exactly what you said to them.
Probably. I do remember one, but I'll tell you that after the fact. I won't tell you this on live.
Well, the reason that they remember is because you made it personal, and it's a very deep moment for them. And so there's no way you can remember all 100, but for them, I mean, that's great because they will take that with them forever, and it gives them a sense of peace and a sense of closure, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's something our history classes don't teach our children these days. It's up to us.
Yeah, and going back to making it personal, like these networks on TV. Again, they'll say a little something, but I'll give you an example of who does it really, really well. And you may or may not be a fan, but NASCAR does it very well. Mm-hmm. I was watching the race last night, and they came on before the race started. They did the prayer. They played the bagpipes. They did the intro. All the intro was about people who had made the ultimate sacrifice. And it was personal. It was showing clips of the troops, people who served. And then during the commercials, they were interviewing some of the Gold Star families. They were talking to some people who had personally lost those people. On every single race car last night, above the windshield was the name of a fallen airman, Marine, soldier, or sailor. And so during the commercials, the drivers would talk about the service member that was riding with them last night, where they served, how they sacrificed, a little bit about their family. I mean, that makes you feel the purpose of the day, not just hear it.
Yeah, yes. NASCAR does that kind of stuff. They just do it right every time. And
NASCAR and rodeo.
They make it personal. They make it personal. They don't. It's not just okay. Let's throw a badge on the uniform and like a lot of people do with like breast cancer awareness. They'll put the pink ribbon on. See, I'm supporting. No, you're not supporting. You're wearing a pink ribbon. You want to support? Donate some money. Talk to some people that are going through it. Be a help. Wearing a ribbon doesn't support anything. doing actions shows that support, and that's what NASCAR does a great job of that on
really
everything. Military, they do it because they like breast cancer example. When they during breast cancer awareness month, they go all out, and not just painting cars pink, because that's easy. They actually bring in the stories, bring people, bring awareness. So yeah, they do it right. That's for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, NASCAR and rodeo. Rodeo is the same way.
Yeah.
We don't have that in North Carolina, John.
There's some pretty good bull riders from North Carolina.
Yeah.
So, well, go ahead, Dustin.
So I wanted to say thank you to John, first of all, for having me on, having us on, talk to us about Memorial Day, but the work that you do with researching those who have fallen and the families who really don't know the rest of the stories or don't know the whole stories. We didn't know the whole story about Leslie's uncle. And so what you are doing, and I can only speak for me, but I'm 99% sure that Jerry and Michael feel the same way, but every day is Memorial Day.
It is
for us because we live it every day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about someone, and some days I think about everyone that I have personally encountered that has made that sacrifice. So I don't really have a choice. Every day is Memorial Day for me because I think about those folks every day. And so the work that you are doing with bringing that information back to the families, I mean, it's immeasurable what you're doing for those family members. So thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, John, I'd like to echo that too, because and you're absolutely right, Dustin. Memorial Day is every single day, and talked about that, earlier on our live broadcast. But one of the biggest, and this is the appreciation that I have for the work that you do, John. As a soldier, the absolute thing that scared me the most, you get a tingle of fear, when the crack rounds are happening or mortars are coming in and stuff like that. But my biggest fear was always not being found or nobody knowing what happened to me, and that's why, we put dog tags in our boots and we put dog tags in our belt line, and, just in case you get ripped to shreds, I wanted somebody to know that that's me, that I'm that body that's laying there. I wanted to make sure that my wife and my mom had closure.
Yeah.
And I just think that is, and I think maybe that's why, when I go to the Tomb of the Unknown in Arlington, and you stand there and you go, God, and you read those words, known but to God. I mean, this family never got to know.
Yeah.
All they know is their soldier didn't come home. But they don't know how it happened. They don't know where it happened. They don't know when it happened. And they never got to stand there at that flag draped casket. And that was something that I just, deep down in the recesses, you don't let that bubble up. But deep down inside, I always thought, if something happens to me, I want my mom and I want my wife to know, that I died doing something that was, good and I died with, courage and valor and all of those Army values. I didn't want them to have to wait, 30, 50 years from now and some DNA test, which I'm thankful for now. But what you do in researching and bringing a little bit of the story behind, that service member. I mean, I God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's humbling work, and I mainly deal with World War II POW-MIA families, and there was roughly 79,000 military members that are listed as missing in action from World War II. You start adding up Vietnam, Korea, Cold War, and current conflicts and stuff. The Defense POW-MIA Accounting Agency has what they call family reference samples, or better known as DNA, for over 90-something% of Korean War forward, but they have less than 8% DNA on file for World War II MIAs.
Wow.
Of the 79,000 that are listed as missing in action from World War II, 35,000 are on what they call the active pursuit list, which meaning they could be identified today. So our government really has and I don't want to get into my politics here, but our government has a lot to do still on getting these family reference samples of DNA for our World War II service members, because the majority of that 35,000 are buried as unknowns in our national cemeteries. And, those guys could be identified and brought home to give these families closure. And I tell you, the families are wanting closure. I'm dealing with brothers and sisters, nieces, nephews, cousins. In fact, my next guest is a nephew of a soldier who's missing in action in the Philippines. So, the more that we can get the word out to families, a lot of these families don't realize, the stories. It's been so long that the stories haven't been told. And these families don't realize that, their relative may have died, over in the Philippines during World War II, but they don't realize that they're still missing in action. They don't always have the full story. And so that's kind of what I do, is I kind of bridge that gap, and I research these POWs, and I find their family, and I ask them if they've donated their DNA to the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory at Dover, and get the DNA on file, and have them contact their service casualty representative, and then start a case and get this to get this moving forward. And one of the other policies of the DPAA is that they have to have 60% of these family reference samples on file for any of these MIAs that were buried in common graves, like in the Philippines during the in the POW camps. Because all these remains got commingled and messed up, and many of the ones that were identified back in the late 40s and early 50s were misidentified. And so, we have to contact all the families to get them to donate. And here they're thinking their loved one's already buried in a grave, in Arlington or wherever. And they didn't realize it might not actually be that person in that grave. In fact, I just worked on a case here not long ago of a guy that served in the 200th Coast Artillery Regiment in the Philippines. His remains were sent home to his family in Albuquerque, or Santa Fe, excuse me, and he's buried at the Santa Fe National Cemetery. Well, it was through some other research and some other identifications that were made, they figured out they had the wrong guy in the grave. The guy was Hispanic, and they've determined that they had the Hispanic remains in the lab in Hawaii. And so I had, the Army couldn't find his family. So I seen some newspaper articles and stuff about it. So I went ahead and I actually was able to find the family, give the information to the Army. The Army was able to get permission from the family to disinter that grave, and so they can make a full as possible accounting. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. But, I can't say thank you enough to you three for your service. And I know that today is not the right day, but, but I do thank you for your service. And, I just wanted to make sure that everybody had the veterans perspective on what Memorial Day truly means. And
I appreciate it. I have some advice for everybody who's watching, or a suggestion. And Michael made a great suggestion on his live last night, is to set a plate at your barbecue or picnic or at your table, whatever, for that day. And it can be every day. I mean, but for Memorial Day, especially, set a plate, and just to signify that they're not there with you. And just kind of, even you're going about your day, you're still having a good time, just every once in a while, it's just a reminder there that there are people who are not here. They're not there with their families barbecuing. having a good time, and that's why that you are able to. The other suggestion that I have is, it's a long weekend. I mean, I'm not saying you have to go on Memorial Day specifically, but at some point during the weekend, go visit a cemetery. It doesn't even have to be a national cemetery.
No.
There are service members buried at almost every cemetery USA, and you find a service member's grave, and you bring a flower, you bring a wreath, or even just bring a penny. And I'll tell you the significance of that, and you guys already know, but even if you just bring a penny and lay it on the headstone, that just tells someone that grave was visited. It tells everyone that somebody visited that grave, and that means a lot, that somebody took the time to come and visit that grave. And so for us, we have more coins and more meaning. If you have a nickel and you lay it on a headstone, that means that you served in training with that service member. If it's a dime, that means you served in some capacity with the service member. And if you see a quarter on a headstone, that means someone laid that there who was with that person when they passed away. And so I mean, for the majority of the population, just bring a little bag full of pennies, and go through your local cemetery, find the service members, lay a penny, and then go back and enjoy the rest of your weekend. But take a minute.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that I make a big deal, the families who go visit those graves will see that penny, and they'll know that somebody else is thinking and took their time out of their day to say thank you. And you can't put a price on that.
Yeah. I have an old saying, and I'm sure you gentlemen have probably heard it before. You die twice. The first time when you actually die, and the second time when somebody speaks your name for the last time. And that's what I hold in my heart. Every time that I research a POW-MIA is, I want to tell that story. I want to tell their story so that people hear it, know it, and learn about what they did to sacrifice for the freedom that I enjoy today. And I kind of need to get this moving on a little bit. I got Jim Knutson in the back room here, but Jim is the nephew of a POW-MIA in the Philippines, and I want to bring Jim in for a little bit and to tell his uncle Julius's story. But I can't thank you guys enough for coming on and just helping to educate us non-veterans about what the true meaning behind Memorial Day is, and what it really means to you guys. Every time you talk about it, I mean, I can feel it. I can feel it every time you talk. I can feel it, and I hope our children, like Dustin was saying, get educated and learn about it and feel it too. So, but thank you guys.
Thanks for having us on, John.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, when you get back in the chat, please drop links for your channels, please. So if there's somebody new in here that hasn't seen you yet, and they can know who you are. You're all three my moderators, so I haven't had anybody monitoring the chat, but thank God there's not a lot of people in there watching. But I appreciate it, guys, very much.
Thank you. See you next time, John.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Sorry for keeping you waiting, Jim. Just 1 second more here, sir. Welcome to Stories of Sacrifice, World War II American POW-MIAs in the Philippines. This is a production of the U.S. POW-MIA Family Locating. I'm your host and lead researcher, John Barrett. Technician, 5th class, Julius St. John Knudsen was born the 3rd of January, 1916. the eldest child of Louis and Betsy St. John Knudsen of Brainerd, Minnesota. He entered the service at Fort MacArthur, California, and was first assigned to the 41st Division on 31 March 1941. He later requested transfer to Fort Lewis, Washington, being assigned to the 194th Tank Battalion. In late 1941, General Douglas MacArthur made reinforcing the defenses of the Philippines a top priority. The 194th Tank Battalion was created for this purpose, combining National Guard units from Minnesota, Missouri, and California. Company A of the 194th Tank Battalion, the unit to which Knudsen was later assigned, had originally been a Minnesota National Guard unit based in Brainerd, Minnesota, Knudsen's hometown. As the threat of war looked increasingly likely, the War Department federalized the unit on 10 February 1941 and dispatched it to Fort Lewis, Washington, where it was mustered as a part of the 194th Tank Battalion, but later shipped off to the Philippines that fall. On 7 December 1941, hours after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, they also attacked the Philippines. American and Filipino forces held off the Japanese until General King surrendered the Bataan forces on 9 April 1942. This was the start of the notorious Bataan Death March, a 65-mile march of death to the northern POW camps. Many atrocities were done to the American and Filipino forces on this march, and possibly to Julius. Witness accounts said Knudsen made a break for the jungle during the march. Later, those witnesses said they heard a shot ring out in the direction that Julius had escaped. He was never seen again. Other accounts listed him as dying on 30 June 1942 at POW Camp Cabanatuan, but he doesn't show up in the camp records, nor the list of those who were buried at the camp cemetery. He is currently listed as missing in action. This is Julius's story, told by his nephew Jim, and his family struggle to get Julius home. Hey Jim, how you doing today, sir?
Pretty good, John. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. It's good to have you on here, and good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again.
So that kind of give a pretty good introduction to Julius and you know, how he went missing in action, some of the misinformation or lack of information, I should say, about, you know, either he died on the Bataan Death March or that he died at the POW Camp Cabanatuan. And I know you've been working with a historian from the Defense POW-MIA accounting agency to kind of reconstruct all that, to kind of see where Julius actually went missing, but they're kind of in a hold spot, so to speak. They're not sure.
Yeah, that's kind of the outline that I've gotten from our representative at the DPAA is, you know, with all the information of certain people like Colonel Miller and our local Walt Straka and our local Henry Peck, all had different accounts of where they last saw him. And it puts them anywhere along the route from the start of it until all the way to before they got in the boxcars. And that's kind of leading us to think that, you know, he never made Cabanatuan, and that's why he's not on the roster at Cabanatuan. But if he ended up there, somebody didn't write his name down. But he was seen by 3 different people at 3 different places along the death march. So at this point in time, it's anybody's guess. And listening to you and the other veterans there, Jerry, Michael, and Dustin, talk about the past and the Memorial Day and everything, it was interesting. Today we got to spend time with our kids at our local memorial in Brainerd, and they have a brand new All Veterans Memorial, and they have one marble platform up there for Bataan, and our local 194 tankers are all listed on the paver bricks on the ground that were installed since last winter because of frost. They all went up in the spring, and I got a chance to show my granddaughter her great-grand uncle's paver stone and name on a paver stone. So the generations keep going, but the search doesn't end. And your point is well taken about this whole disagreement about DNA, and the government likes old school, and they don't seem to have a pressure point that anybody's pushed yet to take that to the next level, which is the autosomal DNA that's available, and just nobody wants to touch it because of, I think, more of they're afraid they're going to get a little dirt on their hands from what they did in the past. And I just have this feeling deep down in that our uncle is in a communal grave somewhere over there in the Philippines, whether it's in the National Cemetery or out on the road in one of the other cemeteries. So that's kind of a synopsis of where I'm at today, and nothing's really new.
Yeah, well, give us a little quick background on Julius. You know, growing up, your grandfather, your father. Just give us a quick background on, you know, kind of how we went through it on the podcast a bit. You know, growing up in Brainerd, he, I guess, due to economic conditions around there at the time, he went off to California. He was a truck driver for a while. Loved his Indian motorcycle.
Yeah, well, my uncle was born in 1916, and my dad was born 3 years later in 1919. So they were 3 years apart. And then there's another brother about 8 years later. But you know, Julius grew up in Brainerd, as my dad did. And after high school, he graduated in 1933. And he was like a lot of guys during the Depression years. There was no work other than something simple and not paying a lot. And so he decided to head out to California for some reason. Obviously, they didn't have the internet back in the mid to late 1930s. So how did he know there's a good work and good pay in California? But he took off on his Indian motorcycle and went to California and ended up working for a trucking company of some kind, driving truck. And then along came the 1940s, and a lot of the guys in California that he worked with were starting to join military service. And so he thought that's a good idea. He was still single. And so he decided to join the Army out there in California. And that's where he got into the Army Guard. I don't know if it was the 31st, if I recall. And he joined up and he was in. And then that unit was scheduled for training in Fort Lewis, Washington. And so off to Fort Lewis they went. And that's where he found Brainerd's 194th Tank Battalion was at Fort Lewis also for training. And he realized, hey, here's all these guys I grew up with. And so he asked for a transfer and they granted it. And all of a sudden he's in the 194th. And of course, the paper trail for that transfer is gone. And of course, the excuse is it's lost in the fire in St. Louis, the records fire at the VA Center. But he was in it, and he served with his buddies, and ended up, they shipped out of California in October of 1941. And they arrived in the Philippines and were setting up shop. And pretty soon came December 8th, and the war started. So all of a sudden, these green young guys, fresh out of Fort Lewis, Washington, were in battle in tanks that they had only been in for 3 or 4 months. And they did their best, and the best wasn't good enough without food, gas, bullets, and replacement soldiers. So they were outmanned, outgunned, and malnourished to start with before they even hit the march. And soon there's the death march.
Yeah. Before they, or right after they shipped out, it was just before Christmas, before Pearl Harbor was bombed. And your folks had gotten together with some community members, and they went down to the local armory there and recorded some records to send off. And I have that audio here I was going to play, and I wanted to play it for everybody, to let everybody listen to your grandfather, your grandmother, and your father and uncle.
Yeah, I think a lot of my family's listening in tonight, so they probably enjoy hearing that.
Oh, good. Yeah. What was give us a little bit of the background behind the record.
Well, my grandfather and grandmother were local people involved in church and community and all that. And somewhere somebody suggested they get involved with this. I don't know if it was the government or a company that would record actual records when they bring their equipment to the local armory, and you come in and record a message to your soldier. And once everybody got done recording, they pack them up in a box and ship them off to wherever your soldier was stationed. And so my dad and his younger brother made one recording, and then my grandfather and his wife, my grandmother, made a recording, and they were all shipped off to the Philippines with everybody else in the 194th here in Brainerd. And unknowns to us, we had not seen those records in years and years. And we were cleaning house here a couple of years ago, and my wife found these old records, and I said, "Oh, I remember seeing those." But we didn't have a record player. We're too digital, I guess. And so anyway, I took them down to the local studio that does all the sound equipment for various events in Brainerd, and they said, "Oh yeah, we can take that record and put it on a CD for you and put it on a MP3 player and so on." And so they did, and that was the first time that I had ever heard these records, which were greetings with the upcoming Christmas season. But for everybody in the 194th, once they realized they weren't going to be talking to their guys for quite a while after the war started, we found out those records never made it there because they were shipped at about the time the war started. And so the government must turn around and ship them right back to where they came from because they were never received. So I'm guessing they needed the shipping arrangements to go for things that were much needed and not for records. So the records came back to Brainerd, and we got them back. And there's several around the state that contacted me after we did an article in the newspaper about it, and they had their records from their family member, which were different units in Minnesota. So it was a statewide thing and probably nationwide, but it's an interesting, and it was amazing how clear and in good condition those records were. And I think you've got them there to play, don't you?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put the first one on here. I'm going to do your grandfather.
Okay.
Hello, Judy.
Oh, this is your grandmother. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button.
Hello, Judy. This is Mother.
You hear that all right?
I want you to know that this was Dad's idea, and it's just taken the town by storm. I went downtown to find out first if there was a machine that could be used, and John Linneman is running a machine for us. And Dad talked to Henry Mills and to Frank Johnson, who are in charge of the local home guard now, and got the use of the armory. And the newspaper has been just wonderful, putting in 3 different articles about this. They even took a list of some of the boys whose people didn't have telephones. I didn't know how to get in touch with them to be sure that they knew about it. And so the newspaper took down the names of those boys, and their folks have called, and everybody's had a great time over it. John Linneman was here till 12:30 last night, although his hours were supposed to be from 7 until 9. He had a fine time with those people that were there last night, and tonight will be just as bad, if not worse, I guess. I telephoned to so many people and some parents that I've never seen and possibly never will, but we've chatted about you boys and had a fine time about it all. Aunt Donna sent us a road map yesterday and a bulletin with the attractions of Portland and so on. I guess she's thinking that she's going to get us out west for a trip. I'm going to wish you a Merry Christmas now, Judy. Goodbye.
I had to throw that picture up there of the 194th while that was playing. So it's kind of nice being able to go back and listen to your family's voices. And, you know, you were pretty young when you last saw your grandmother. So.
Yeah. I think I was around, well, we lost my grandfather first. I think I was 10, and she was 2 or 3 years behind him passing. So we didn't get a lot of adult grandparent interaction with them, unfortunately. So.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and here's your grandfather's.
Hello, Jonas. This is your dad. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We're all busy here at home, and we've got a big job in the North Country, and John and Mr. Carlton and several other the boys that you know are working for me. We're going to be busy all winter here, and our Spring Valley job is going along. We're fighting some freight rates right now so as we can get to ship the ore. We're going to develop this thing in the spring. And I think that we'll have a lot of things for you boys to do when you get back to this country, which I hope will be soon. Now, I hope that you aren't getting too much heat. We know that you're in the other end of the world and that you're having your summer now. But do what you can, fella, and I wish you a Merry Christmas again, and I hope you'll get along in good shape right soon.
Yeah, that was your grandfather. I had to throw a picture of him up there real quick.
Yeah.
I don't have my pictures in order, so I had to scroll through them real quick.
Oh, that's worked out fine. Oh.
All right, I'll play the one of your dad and your uncle.
Hi, Jude, old boy. This is Yib talking. I hear it's kind of warm down there. Temperature here is getting to the darn cold stage. Probably by the time you hear this record, we will have had 40 below. But I won't be here to feel it anyway. I'm going to the Anderson School of Aeronautics in L.A. Expect to be there in November sometime. Jim Alderman's in Fort Sill, Oklahoma now. It's deader than the devil here in town. All my pals are in the Army or Air Corps except Joe Graham, and he's married now. Bob Mann's in St. Paul working in Gimporium. Marge Gustafson asks about you once in a while, and so does Al Newey and Doc Hokinson and Bill Gaffney. Bill Fisher's in California working now in an airplane factory. Al Trumbull and Zane and R.B. are still around. Frank Hickerson's married and working for SR. Dick Geist in Seattle, and I see Carl Zoppi once in a while with his DuPont wife. He asks about you. I guess that's all I got to say. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thor the boxer.
Well, I'm about 6 foot tall now, Jude, and I weigh 158 pounds. I'm a junior in high school, and I'm vice president of the class. My subjects are English and American history, architecture, drawing, and cabinet making. I'm making a cedar chest in cabinet making. The prom is going to be a pretty big affair this year. I wish you were here to see it. I'm on the stage doing working on the junior class play now. Thor, we had a hard time to get him in here, but he finally came, and we brought a can of dog food in, so he'd be sure to come in. We were going to make the record yesterday, Monday, but Thor wasn't around at the right time, so we had to wait till it's noon. Well, that's all I've got to say. Goodbye and good luck. Come on, speak. Whoa, Thor. Come on, speak. Whoa,
So that was your father and your other uncle.
Yeah, that was my Uncle Richard. He was in the Navy. He served on a destroyer, and I don't know anything more about his military history. But my dad, when you showed that picture of the blimp, I kind of laughed because most people don't know that the Navy, of course, had blimps, but his ranking was First Air Midshipman, and the Navy doesn't have that ranking anymore because they don't have blimps anymore. But he enjoyed his blimp service and all. He had some really cool stories to tell over the years.
Oh, I bet he did too. And it's amazing to have that piece of family history that you have with this audio. I mean, it's the first time that I've been able to hear, that kind of audio that it was just a Christmas greeting to their son, Merry Christmas, get home safe to the family.
Yeah. And we, of course, most of us kids, there were 7 of us, and we were all so young when they passed that we really had no recollection of their voices whatsoever, because in those days you didn't have voice recordings. There was no movie cameras with audio that you could adapt and play back. And so that's the first time I remember hearing their voices. But as soon as I heard them, I recognized them. There was a thing inside that just said, yep, that's Grandpa. Yep, that's Grandma. So that was cool.
Yeah. There we go. So Julia shipped off to the Philippines. The Pearl Harbor was bombed December 7th. Less than 8 hours later, the Philippines was attacked and invaded. Then 194th was actually kind of stationed at Clark Field, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
They were kind of back in the trees there a bit when the airfield got bombed. They, just like Pearl Harbor, they caught all our aircraft on the ground. Our aircraft had been up earlier in the day because they heard about Pearl Harbor, but for reasons really unknown, other than they needed to refuel, they landed around noon Philippines time, and that was about the time the Japanese came in and attacked Clark Field. Excuse me. But to kind of make the long story short, they fought through the 194th along with another American and Filipino regiments and troops fought through the Battle of Bataan, and on 9 April 1942, due to starvation, malnutrition, diseases that were going rampant throughout all the fighting men, the malaria, dysentery, beriberi, lack of medication to treat these men, because they've been holding off the Japanese for over 4 months, waiting for reinforcements to arrive that never did show. They had always had the hope that we were gonna, or we would be able to send troops over there to help bail them out according to plans that they had made prior to the war. But that never happened. We ended up with what they called the Europe First policy, where most of our supplies and men were going over to Europe to fight, the European campaign, and so on 9 April, General Edward King made the ultimate decision that he needed to
surrender.
Give up. Yeah, well, I was trying to put it in a different way, but it was they needed to surrender, to try to save as many men's lives as possible, and civilians. A lot of the civilians had evacuated to the Bataan Peninsula, along with our fighting forces, and civilians were getting mutilated and killed, and it was just an epic battle that unfortunately we couldn't support any longer. So on the day of surrender, it started what they called the infamous Bataan Death March, 65-mile march of death, where our men and the Filipinos were put in groups of, I think, around 100 and marched north to the POW camps. And your Uncle Julius had made the start of this march. And where was he last seen?
Well, the furthest north that any of the previous service members that are of written record placed him at San Fernando. And my understanding is that's where the boxcars were. Well, the boxcars were to be loaded with men directly to the POW camps, O'Donnell and Cabanatuan. Well, his name was never on either of those two camp records. And the fact that somebody said they saw him south of San Fernando, that's kind of where the end of the trip is, at least for me, search-wise, because the records just don't put him any further north of that. And then a lot of the people from Albie Abrahamson's book, who did a lot of the finding of the buried people buried soldiers along the death march, when he came back after the war and started talking to all the local civilians, and they were very happy to say, well, we know one's buried here and one's buried there and 3 are buried here. It was amazing the amount of buried soldiers that the local people helped him find, and they were disinterred from where they were and sent to Manila. And in Manila, they didn't know for sure who anybody was either, unless they had an affixed dog tag, which most of them did not. So they put 3, 4, 5, 10 of them in a single grave and marked them unknown. So here we sit with a very good chance, in my opinion, that our uncle is one of these unknowns already buried at the Manila American Cemetery, but just unidentified because they won't exhume and do autosomal DNA on all the remains. And it's as simple as that. And for people that are listening, there's old-fashioned DNA and there's modern DNA. And our government needs to get behind the modern DNA and do a very honorable disinterment of all the unknown graves and DNA all the remains and start contacting family members, because it's as simple as that.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate solution to the whole problem. Would be to exhume these graves and try to get the DNA from the MIA, and then match it up to any family reference sample DNA that's on file currently. The other thing about that too is, you know, I had Dustin and Michael and Jerry on earlier. Each one of those guys have provided, you know, their DNA to the Armed Forces medical examiners when they enlisted and joined the service. And as we all know, you know, military service runs in the families, and all they'd have to do is just match up. If they exhume these graves today, all they'd have to do is just run that DNA sequencing through, you know, that whole database alone of just the service members that have served currently and in the past, and they'd probably get hundreds, if not thousands, of matches to family members, and we would be bringing a lot of guys home today.
The bells would be ringing if they would do that.
Yeah. And when you refer to the bells ringing at the DNA laboratory, every time they get a match, they run down the hall and ding this bell. But so Julius, kind of the story that I've been sticking with, and what really sticks in my mind, is the witness account that actually had him running into the jungle at Palunga. Is that correct?
Yes,
and,
that was Walt Straka's story, who's the only living survivor of the Brainerd 194th. He'll be 101 this fall, but he said he remembers seeing Julius run into the woods when there was a curve in the road where the visibility of the staggered Japanese guards was kind of interrupted because of the curve in the road. And all of a sudden, he said Julius took off into the woods. And by the time they straightened out their formation and their walk, and the Japanese realized somebody had gotten out of line, they figured out he had scooted into the woods. And so they sent out a Japanese patrol the same direction that Walt says our uncle ran. And they said a little bit later, it was getting toward dark. It was time for them to stop, where they just sleep on the side of the road for 2 or 3 hours. And they said during that time they were sleeping or resting, they heard shots in the woods off in the direction where these patrols went. And Walt remembers commenting, I bet you they got Julius. Well, that was his recollection just last year. And he's pretty darn sharp for 100 years old. And to remember that kind of detail about where he saw Julius. And then there's another record in a local historian book that interviewed Harold Peck from the 184th, and he said he saw Julius on the back of a Japanese truck going down the road, and that he had noted Julius was limping, like he had a bad leg or a bad hip or something, and they saw him going down the road in a truck, but he didn't say exactly where he saw that. So there's another account of, you know, was that before he ran into the woods or after? And it raises all kinds of questions. And then, and of course, their leader, Colonel Miller, in his book of notes that was dug up after they got out of the POW camps, his comments in the notes were that Julius was last seen south of San Fernando. So there we've kind of got an area that's less than the 65 mile of the whole march, that somewhere in there is probably where Julius was lost or shot or stabbed or whatever the Japanese might have done and pulled off. But if he escaped and later got demised, he could have been one of those people in these civilian cemeteries or in the backyard of a local farmer that Albie Abrahamson dug up. And again, he'd be marked as unknown, would have been sent back to Manila. And there he is, just waiting for somebody to bring up the remains, type the DNA. And if that's him, let's bring him home.
Yep. Yeah. He, you know, Master Sergeant A.B. Abraham, he actually fought with these guys during the Battle of Bataan, remained as a POW at Camp Cabatatuan throughout the whole entire captivity of the war, and he was liberated by the Army Rangers when they came in and liberated the POW camp. And if anybody listening hasn't saw the movie The Great Raid, that would be a good one to go watch. It's all about the liberation of Cabatatuan, and Master Sergeant Abrahams was a part of that, of those that were liberated. And then
Yeah,
he
John,
was assigned.
could you hold just a second?
Go ahead.
So,
Yep.
So, okay.
So after the war, after he was liberated, General MacArthur personally assigned him the Graves Registration Unit of the Office of the Quartermaster General, and it was his job to go back down on the Bataan Peninsula. He fought in every one of the battles. He knew where a majority of these men were buried that had died in combat, and he also knew along the route where many of these men were killed. And it was usually near the holding areas when they stopped for the night and things like that. And he did work with a lot of the local civilians. They were able to point him in the right direction on where, after these guys were killed along the road, a lot of these civilians took it upon themselves to get our men that were killed and bury them in the church cemeteries or in private graves on their own property. So he went back through and he kept great records of all these disinterments that he had done originally. And some of them, a lot of the historians are discounting some of those records, but I haven't seen him wrong in too many cases. So exactly. And you're right. If they did these disinterments at Manila of these unknowns and pulled the DNA, they've had hundreds and hundreds of matches if they ran them through those databases.
Yep, and that's the step where it's going to take people with contacts to their state and mostly to their national U.S. senators and U.S. representatives, and start putting their feet to the fire to tell the DPA to get involved with a modern DNA technology and to start to listen to the private sector that's leading this battle. It should actually be the DPAA leading the fight to get that modern DNA, but they're, I think, afraid of stepping on toes of somebody that went before them that said this was better. Who knows? So,
right. Well, hopefully it happens for your family someday soon.
Yep.
They really get to looking pretty deep at this case and putting more of the arrows together to figure out where Julius actually went missing and where he could have possibly been buried, and get it down to an isolated area where they can focus on those men that died in that area and can get the DNA from these other families and and follow their current policy if that's what they have to do. But hopefully that policy changes.
Yeah, and that's what we're pushing.
It's kind of a hard, kind of what I do, and I didn't do this in your guys' case, but some of these families that actually found out that they had a POW-MIA relative that died over there, and they contact the Army or the service casualty office. It was Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force that were all, or Army Air Corps, that were all involved in the Battle of Bataan, and these families contact their service casualty officer, and the office will open a case. And then what they find out is, once they get this case open, they find out that their loved one died in a POW camp. And see, they didn't know this information back then. It was all kept classified and kept secret from the families. All they did is receive a telegram saying, a telegram saying basically that your son died in the Philippines. We don't know where the remains are. If something might happen in the future, we'll reopen the case and investigate it. Basically, is what these telegrams were saying. But so they ended up dying in these POW camps, and they're from the disease and malnutrition and everything else, and they ended up getting buried with anywhere from 5 to 20, 30 men that died that day. And these burial details would take them out and put them in a common grave or a mass grave. And so after the war, when they disinterred all the remains got commingled. So now they have this 60% DNA policy on file, where they have to have 60% family reference samples on file before they even try to disinter one isolated single grave. That they're all buried as individuals now, as unknown. but it's commingled remains, so they require the 60% DNA being on file. Well, that kind of makes a family think, well, it's going to take forever to get my loved one identified. So that's kind of where I kind of step in, and I try to help find these other families for each of these graves, and contact the other families and try to get this DNA on file. But I tell you, that's a job in itself. You know, this one of these last cases that I worked on for Private Martin Koenig, for his brother still wanting to bring him home. The DPAA combined 3 of these Kabataquan graves together for a total of 101 POWs. It took me it took me a month to whittle down all these families in here. Oh, it's been a couple months. The last I heard, we're at 58% of having family reference DNA on file for, you know, we got 58% of them. Okay. So hopefully here, you know, any day now we're going to hear they've got this, they needed 60%, and that's going to be a lot of men that's going to be coming home. And, but in your case, they've kind of put you to the tail end, so to speak, because you know, they're really not really digging hard into looking for these isolated types of you know, burials or MIAs. It just seems like they all got picked up when Master Sergeant Abrahams, you know, did his thing, and they all got buried as unknown. But you know, they're not pinpointing where these guys were picked up at. No,
and that's part of the problem. The 60% rule, and I wrote that to my senators and my local or my state representative, that there's no way to know if there, let's say, 100 unknowns in one mass grave. How do you know who those 100 are, so you could try to get that 60% number? There's no way to know unless you do DNA on all of them. Then you can contact the family and say, can we have your permission to go through this process? And it's just like a dog chasing its tail. You just can't get them to commit to the fact that they're going down the wrong rabbit hole with this old DNA process. And it's going to take hundreds of years if they stick with this old process before they would ever get to the last unknown that are buried in Manila to start with. And they're already having success in the Hawaiian Punch Bowl Cemetery, where they're finding exhuming unknowns there, and they've been on U.S. soil all these years. They had all this time, and they got the lab right there in Honolulu to do that kind of work, and they never did it. So what took it?
It took a Navy veteran, and I'm talking the USS Oklahoma identifications that they've been making here lately. It took a Navy veteran, a lot of time and research, and a lot of poking and prodding, and almost lawsuits being filed for the DPAA to finally agree, and the DOD to finally agree to disinter these graves out of the Punch Bowl Cemetery to make these Oklahoma identifications. And you know, and that's unfortunately what it's taken here at Manila in the MIAs from the Philippines, you know, the battle in the Philippines. It took one man, John Eakin, to you know, actually file a lawsuit to get his cousin Bud Kelder identified. And you know, go through all these records and the individual deceased personnel files, and to figure out, oh, this is my uncle here. This guy had gold teeth. My uncle had gold inlays put in his teeth, and he's the only one matches from this grave, and that's my uncle in that grave. And it still took a lawsuit because they wouldn't believe him, and they wouldn't believe the evidence. It still took a lawsuit in federal court to actually get his cousin Bud identified and brought home. And that's kind of what kicked off this whole thing for this for the Philippines and the MIAs that are located there at Manila, is this lawsuit. So, and you know, I think now they've made identifications now out of 5 or 6 total common graves out of Manila. So, and they've got a bunch more from another lawsuit. They've got a bunch more that they just disinterred here within the last couple of years. That we're going to see a lot more identifications coming from there. So, the good thing is
the public should not have to go through the legal system to force the DPAA to do their job in the most modern way. And that is not the way they're currently doing it. So it's simply, do you want to drive a Model T or do you want to drive a comfortable Malibu these days? And they're still driving the old Model T. They need to get up to speed and let the rest of us have our loved ones brought home so we can not have to worry about that. Yeah, I remember, my dad started the search for his brother after he retired, and his first attempt at information was given the same excuse of the fire in St. Louis. Records about him were destroyed and so on. And so then he asked about the life insurance because he had never heard his mother or dad say they ever got life insurance. And they were told that he didn't name a beneficiary when he signed up, so there was no life insurance. And he just kept getting these curveballs thrown at him. And these are in the handwritten letter days. There was no internet back then. So when the internet started to come around, and that's when my dad was having his ailing health, and I told him, I said, I'll keep up the fight as information grows available, and we'll do everything we can to continue your journey. And that's all we could do, for him in his last days, is just say, you were doing the right thing. You just didn't have the right tools yet. And now we've got the tools. It's time the government steps up and does their job.
Yeah, agreed. So, and that's kind of, what you were saying there is kind of why, I brought Dustin and Jerry and Michael on, is because they have an expectation, as they signed that dotted line to fight for this country, do whatever Uncle Sam told them to do, and go where Uncle Sam told them to go. And if they didn't get, if they didn't make it through, they didn't want to. They wanted to come home.
Yep.
It wasn't. You don't leave a man behind, and that's, in a sense, being buried under a cross without a name. In my humble opinion, it's just like you never come home.
That's right.
And as a family, what are your thoughts and feelings about that as a family member?
Well, I think everyone in our family is encouraging all along. I give them updates when I hear something from DPAA, or if I find out something on my own, just fishing around, and I'll share it with my brother and 5 sisters, and then they share it with their kids. And so it's still alive in the family. It's encouraged, but most of them are not in this area. They're spread out all over the country, so they can't do research locally like I can, and they don't have the contacts like I do now through our 194th Regiment that I joined. It's a support group, and mostly retired guys and family members of deceased 194th soldiers. And with aside from this virus issue, why we meet monthly and do anything we can to support the local families and to support other military as well, be it the Legion and VFW and so on, as a great group of guys. And that was my first introduction into being involved with a military type organization. It's just a support group. It's not the military, but at the same point, the object is to support the military. And I didn't get to serve. I know a lot of people wondered, you're the right age, did you serve in Vietnam? I said, no, I got drafted, but I got kicked out on a medical condition. And so in one way I was lucky. So I never got to serve. But I do respect so much those that did and that answered the call. And like my uncle and my dad, and those that serve deserve that pat on the back all year long, and at many events, not just the Memorial Day. And one of your guys earlier, I can't remember which one, made a statement, a very short statement that really rung a bell with me. And when he said, so much of the stuff that happens around these holidays is like white noise. And it resonated with me that it's so easy for people to say in every TV program you watch and every group you get together, oh, I love you. And then, oh, thank you for your service. It just gets to be something to say because they don't have anything better to say. And the white noise aspect of that struck me as a very strong statement because it can be true. What effort is there to put a penny on a gravestone? There's no effort whatsoever. So I think those guys spoke very, correctly when they were making their statements. So.
Yeah, and no effort at all. Put a penny on the headstone and to say his name out loud. You know.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Jim, I really appreciate you coming on, and I've been going on here now for an hour and 30 minutes. So
yeah, time flies.
Yeah, it does actually. I actually skipped part of what I was going to be showing earlier too, just because just to get this information out there. It's people don't realize the POW-MIA issue, and that there's major issues with the whole program altogether. Still, even after they did a reorganization here 4 or 5 years ago, there's still a huge issue within the POW-MIA accounting community where there's a lot more that can be done if we just convince our elected officials to take up the charge and to make these changes to policies and procedures.
Yep. Good old saying, follow the money. So it's time to put the money where it's going to do the best use, and that's not in the old technology. So
yeah, exactly. So
I appreciate your time, John.
Yeah, and if anybody's interested, I did put a link down below to the podcast that I actually did with you about Jim, and it really gives a lot more of the story. So I think we went 40, 50 minutes to an hour on that podcast. So it's
not a problem. I appreciate the opportunity to do this, and I'm sure I'll hear from my brothers and sisters, and they'll tell me I didn't comb my hair right, and then I'll remind them I don't have a lot to comb anymore.
Hey, I was just happy to finally get a haircut.
That's a good point. I didn't need to worry about that.
No, I tell you, I even went out looking for clippers at Walmart, and they were sold out.
So. Try the animal department.
I did. I did. They were all sold out. So hopefully we're all getting back to normal. Now you're located up in Brainerd, Minnesota. Now tell us just real quickly. A lot of my followers here are RVers, full-time and part-time RVers, and there's a lot to see and do up there around Brainerd.
Oh, it's a beautiful area. We're about 2 hours north of Minneapolis, hour north of St. Cloud, and it's kind of on the way to the Lake of the Woods, and to the north, and kind of on the northeast direction, it's on the way to the Voyageurs National Park and some of the other canoe areas and wilderness areas, and it's a beautiful place to visit, and there's plenty to do, and some beautiful resorts, and of course lakes. There's a lake everywhere. You can throw a cat and hit a lake no matter where you throw the cat.
Yeah, some good fishing too. Yeah,
some good fishing.
I'm gonna try to get up there and visit you here one of these days soon. So
yep,
I'm fixing to go full time, and in about 29 days. So
hey, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, we got the plug in next to the garage, so you're welcome anytime.
All righty. Well, I appreciate it. And again, Jim, thank you for coming on and telling us a little more about Julius and just kind of your family struggle that you've had in getting him identified and brought home. So.
Well, thank you so much for all your work and all you helped my wife find a family of her Vietnam bracelet too, and we really appreciated that. So your research, you're pretty stealth at that, and that's really good.
All righty, sir. I appreciate it.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. You have a great evening.
You too, John.
Or night.
And evening.
Yep.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Well, thank you, everybody. Sorry I went so long with this live stream, and I appreciate you for all of those that stuck with me through it all. And again, I want to thank the moderators, Wayward Wags, Dustin for coming on, and Michael with our Epic RV Adventure, and Jerry at Happy Place Diaries. If you're not a subscriber to any of those channels, please go over to their channel and hit that subscribe button and wipe that bell clean for them. And again, I appreciate everybody attending and helping me, give out my meaning for Memorial Day and just honoring those who give their life for our country and those that still haven't come home yet. So I hope everybody has a great evening, and we'll see you here in about 2 weeks. I'll do a live stream every other Monday. So we'll see you not this coming Monday, but the next Monday. So you all have a good evening, and thank you again for coming.